I have a vision. Can I make these available to you? Let's see. So my plan is to basically photograph these and then convert them into digital files that can be used either printed out or used in a digital map on a, you know, for online gaming. And I want to do your basic top down. I want to retain individual tiles so that it's modular. I want to be able to put together complete maps as Battlemats. And I also want to be able to do isometric, because I think that's a pretty cool idea. So I need to set up the photography for this. That's the first step, is to photograph these. So yeah, I've got my camera. I'm going to set the tripod up and figure out the challenges of the photography. Okay, exciting times. Okay guys, so to set this photography up, to make these EVA tiles work in a digital format, I've obviously got to get the camera on and the tiles sorted in the right way. So here is my camera on the tripod, and if you look down here, here is the tile set up ready on the tabletop. And if you notice, I've put some tape here, just some painter's tape, and that's a registration mark, so that I know that each tile will be photographed in the same, from the same exact point, so the lighting should stay the same for every tile. There's a couple of other considerations for the actual isometric photography, and I'll talk about that when I set those up. So I'm going to photograph these now, and yeah, then we'll be done. Okay, I'll see you in a minute. So my hope is that the top-down tiles should be relatively straightforward, because they're a basic rectangle. So I have a Photoshop file set up here, which is using the Photoshop's own grid overlay, which has been set to 1-inch increments. And I've set the document up to be exactly 22 inches across its long length and 10 inches in its depth. Now, what I need though is a grid that will actually print. So it's very easy to find a 1-inch grid on our good old classic Google, and all I'm doing is just resizing that grid now to marry up with the Photoshop's own grid, non-printing grid, and just making sure that that then fits the tile itself. Now it's quite important to make sure that that layer sits at the top of the stack. Now I played around with a couple of settings here on the layer overlay blends, but I ended up going with a slightly different option, which I'll show you in a moment. First of all though, I needed to set the opacity of that layer down low enough so that it wasn't over dominating the image itself. Then I decided to invert the image, for which you go up to the image menu, to adjustments, and down to invert. And then you want to select the layer overlay screen, and that will give you a nice white grid that's less intrusive than the black grid. Okay, so I'm just opening the next image file now from the photos, and I want to show you a run through this again so that I can just talk about another couple of points, in particular that layer structure. So I'm just rotating the photograph, just cropping down to the bit of the photograph I actually want.
And then I just go into image size so that I can adjust the actual image size to the resolution and rough dimensions that I want it to actually be for the finished tile. And then if I click and hold that, I can drag it into the file that's my master file. Now it's here that I want to talk about this layer structure. You'll see there at the top of the stack a folder, and each photograph is placed inside that folder. Now the folder has a layer mask attached to it. Now that layer mask has 1 inch of the document filled in black, and anywhere where it's black it will mask the image. So every photograph I lay into this folder actually ends up with the white border 1 inch wide in a document that is actually 22 inches wide. So I end up with a nice clean tile that is 20 inches across and 10 inches deep going the other direction. And hopefully that makes sense. If you're not sure about layer masks, please pop a question down in the thread and I will do my best to describe it again in the comments down there. So the last and final challenge of the tiles is to make sure that where the ridge transits off the edge of the image, that it is definitely at the midway point. So I've just drawn myself on a new layer some guides here in the green using the brush tool. And then I'm using the transform tool, and in particular the warp option of the transform tool, and that will allow me to pull and nudge the image around as I need to ensure that the ridge goes off dead at the center point of the tile on both the long edge and the short edge. And because of that layer mask, I always maintain a clean edge, which is the kind of an important part here. It means I don't have to worry about that. Now, it's important that you first of all just select the area you want, duplicate that bit of layer, and then transform the duplicated layer. And this will allow you to more cleanly blend the correction into the original image. And then flatten that back down so you're still left with just one image layer.
Okay, so the isometric are a bit more challenging. The top down is straightforward, but the isometric are a bit more challenging. If you look at the setup here, so what I've got is the tile is just resting on a raised plinth at the back to give it the angle. I've again got my registration mark just here with the painter's tape. It's just reminded me I need to put a registration mark on the plinth at the back as well, so that I know where the back edge comes to. So basically what happens here is I've got a fill light going on just here. This is just my little fill light here. I've got this fill light going on here. If I turn that off, you can see what happens. The shadows, of course, from the illumination light fill in too much, so this fill light just bounces enough light into those shadows to make sure that I don't lose all that fiery glow. So that's one complication. The other complication, of course, is I'm setting this up to be an isometric tile, and the photography, of course, has all of the perspective in it. So that's where some Photoshop shenanigans will go on, and hopefully I'll be able to iron out the perspective so that it reads in visually in isometric view. Okay, so now I'm going to take the photographs of these, and one of the other considerations, just while I'm thinking about it here, if you look at the tile, so I will be photographing the tile from this angle, but the tile will also need to be photographed from that angle as well. So of all of the tiles I've got, they all need to be photographed in reverse, so there's 2 sets. Okay, alright, so I'm going to photograph these down here now, and yeah, and then we'll be jumping over into Photoshop to show you the next bit.
So here we are in Photoshop, getting ready to do the next step with the isometric tiles. So yeah, let's hope this goes all right. So I'm just lassoing out the image here from the original photograph, and as before, I've found an isometric grid online. I've done the same setup for the isometric grid. Hadn't quite got as far as doing the layer structure yet. I actually did do these before I did the top-down ones. However, my original plan here had been to warp the tile to match the grid, and then actually have a cutout where the ridgeline would drop down. So we would create these sort of interlocking tiles that had a sort of a shape that matched the isometric setup. But as I progressed through this, I really quickly realised that I was going to make a real rut for my own back, because I'd have so many different tile shapes because of the either, you know, like this tile being long, that tile being a drop down. It was just going to become really quite problematic. So that's when I kind of decided that I was going to do the top downs, and then I came back to this the isometric, and as you can see now, I'm following a very similar principle to what I did with the top downs. I've got my layer structure set up, I've measured out and marked out where my center lines actually are, and I'm just working with a rectangle that is in isometric view. And this made for a much simpler process, because every tile was going to be the same shape. All I'd got to do was go through and edit the edges from the original EVA tiles, which is what I'm doing here, just using the clone tool and just filling out the areas and making sure that those ridge lines match the center points. I had to do a little bit of copy pasting, as you can see as well, just to make sure that the image read correctly in isometric. But with regard to the isometric element, I only really needed to deal with where the ridges were running off the center points, to make sure that they looked right in the center of the image, that it just visually looks like it's in isometric, despite the fact that in actual fact there still exists a certain degree of perspective. So yeah, just lots of work with the clone tool to edge out the image as needed, and duplicate parts of the layer, transform, and make sure that it all fit. And I worked my way through all of the tiles doing this, and ended up with a set that I think are quite workable. Well, there you have it. I have, I believe, successfully converted my real terrain into printable tiles that can create a usable battle mat. So the tile set itself, only the top-down set is available at the moment, and that is going to be available through DriveThruRPG, and I will put the link for that down in the doobly bits below. So the tile set includes a total of 60 of these tiles, 15 tiles made up of 2 sets of photography from different light directions, and then another 15 tiles that have the grid on as well. So you could have gridded or ungridded. These are the ungridded printouts here. And in addition to that, it's not this particular layout, but I've also done one battle mat layout, which is 60 by 40 inches. But with the tiles, you can make that bigger, or smaller, whatever. This is 30 by 40. So ideal for a good number of the smaller skirmish games. A little big for, say, Rain in Hell, but Rain in Hell will certainly work at this size. Now, I'm going to say a big thank you and a big shout out to my patrons, because Patreon is really going to be the thing that makes this start to work properly, I think, because now I have something, an asset that I can funnel into my patron from the terrain side of my creative studio. So patrons at the first tier will get any battle mats I create. Patrons at the second tier will get the full set of tiles as well as the battle mat, and patrons at the third tier, which is still only a few dollars or pounds wherever you happen to be, will also have access to the Photoshop files, so you can kind of play around with your own designs as well. Printing out, I've kept the tiles to the same 10 by 20 scale of the original EVA tiles, but obviously you can print the non-gridded ones out at whatever size you want to. So you could print these out at A4. As you guys know, I have a large format printer, so I can actually print these tiles out, you know, in one go. If any of you would be interested in me providing a printing service and actually sending you a set of tiles in the post, get in touch, because if enough people are interested in that, then I may set that up through my website. But as for the rest of you who don't necessarily want to commit to being a patron, you can get these for a few dollars on DriveThruRPG. My plan is to also in the near future release the isometric set. So if you'd like to see the isometric set again, shove that down in the comments, because it's going to be based on, this whole project is going to be based on how enthusiastic people are about the idea. And if this works, then I will also extend this to all of the other terrain pieces that I'm doing, including the scatter terrain. I'm working on ideas of how I can introduce the scatter terrain into this general concept. I would eventually like to be able to add bundle deals together on DriveThruRPG, but it turns out I've got to get a few sales in before I can do that. A little bit of time has to pass before I can do that. So I can't offer any bundles currently, but that is definitely in the near future. So if you have found this of interest, be that because you want to have a go at doing the same thing with your own terrain, or if you are interested in going as just supporting me and the channel, then please head over to DriveThruRPG, get yourself a set of these tiles, let me know how you get on with them, let me know if I need to tweak anything, problems that you've had. If you want to help the channel out on a more long-term basis, obviously Patreon is the place to go. That is definitely going to be very supportive in this conversion endeavors, bringing the larger body of real terrain to a wider audience in a usable way. And of course, you can also help out my channel and the studio by heading over to my website. All of the links for these are down below. And just, you know, if you see a print or something you'd like, then bag yourself a print. Okay, guys, I think that is a wrap. I am very, very, very pleased with how this has turned out. I really think there's a great future in it, and I really think that I can give you guys an enjoyable gaming experience on these mats. So, anyway, any questions, anything you want to know, as always, just pop those in the comments down below. I answer all of them. I love reading the comments, you know. So I will see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye.
Sean, stop using these dirty great big hands to beat the table whilst you're recording. Okay? Thank you.